You've possibly seen Henrik Kniberg's famous skateboard-to-car diagram, the one that shows how Agile software development is meant to be done, adding incremental value, not incrementally assembling a solution we already have in mind. It uses a customer's desire for a car as a metaphor for a new product or feature and shows us two ways that we can think about getting there. And the version of the story I'm going to tell today around Henrik's diagram, one you can use when explaining this image to others, that amplifies one dimension and adds another. And I'm not going to be contradicting anything that Henrik said, but I'm going to extend it in a way that I think subtly and significantly changes what we take away from this diagram. I'm Anthony Marcano. I help companies who want an edge over their competitors by taking their software delivery capabilities to the top of industry performance benchmarks with my talks, coaching, and consulting for leadership and teams. To help with this, I'm going to go back to one of Henrik's original blog posts on this diagram, and I'll leave a link to his original blog post in the description of this video. And one of the key objections that would often be received is, well, there's absolutely no way that if a customer wanted a car that we're going to give them a skateboard. And one of the points that he made is that you wouldn't necessarily give all your customers the skateboard. What he wanted to show was that you can actually get to the dream version of your product through a series of steps, with the earliest testable product, the earliest usable product, and then the earliest lovable product. And I really liked how he put across this idea of aim for the clouds, but deliver in small steps. And when he says customers, he means actually the people representing your customers and or users, and they're not always the same. I've got a whole article about that over on LinkedIn. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. But the point he was making is that whether it was the tire, the chassis with some tires, or even just a chassis with a bodywork, but not necessarily an engine or a roof, ultimately the customer can't use it, they can't experience it, they can't give you feedback about it, until eventually they get the final version of the car that they asked for. And this is where my version of the story starts to change slightly, because in the original blog post, Henrik does explain that the customer might just want to get from point A to point B faster. But I like to tell the story by suggesting that they've currently got a commute to work and they have to walk. And that walk is a 90-minute journey each way, which actually helps with one of the elements of his original blog post, where he suggests that one of the options is to actually test a bus ticket. And with this 90-minute each way commute in mind, we can start to illustrate some of the savings that can be gained right from the outset. Let's say that in the first week, we actually deliver the customer a skateboard. I can say to the customer, this isn't what you asked for, and that's going to take a little while for us to actually create. However, in the meantime, we've found a way to save you some time on your journey every day. This could save you 30 minutes each way, a total of 1 hour a day. So now, by the end of that first week of using the product, that customer has now saved a cumulative 5 hours, compared to the previous approach where they would have saved 0 hours. Using this skateboard was a little bit wobbly, so the proposal is that we add a handlebar to it, just to make it a little easier and a little more straightforward to get to work every day. So by the end of the second week, you're even more comfortable and you've saved a cumulative 10 hours of travel time. Then we come up with the idea that we can evolve this device into something that ends up resembling something like a bicycle. They can go even faster on their journey. And let's say this knocks off another 15 minutes each way. Now, instead of 90 minutes each way, they're down to 45 minutes each way, a further 30 minutes per day saving. So by the end of that week, they're then going to save another 7.5 hours. So now a cumulative 17.5 hours of journey time has been saved. And now this customer is actually starting to feel pretty good. The customer realizes that they're limited by the speed of the bicycle, not by the speed of the road. So we find a way to make it even faster. And just to keep the numbers simple, we get their journey time down to 30 minutes each way. So a total of 1 hour per day. In the week that follows, they're then going to save themselves 10 hours. So with the cumulative 17.5 hours collected before, and the 10 hours now, that's 27.5 cumulative hours by the end of that fourth week. At this point, I want to go back to Henrik's version of the story, where he emphasizes the team's opportunity to get feedback from the customer and for the customer to learn something, where in this case, they realize that what they really like is having the wind in their hair, and they don't want the hardtop that they originally had in mind, and now they're thinking that they'd like a convertible. However, this is where my version of the story changes the ending slightly. Because when the customer actually gets to driving their car for the first time, even though it's a convertible, they now realize that their commute has gone back to a 90-minute journey each way. Why? Because of traffic. At this point, they realize that the solution they had before was actually far more appropriate. And because it's software, we can easily revert back to the previous version so they can continue to have the saving or the outcome that they were looking for. With the approach illustrated in the bottom half of this diagram, and by explaining it in a way where we go back to the user's story, see what I did there? Yes, the user's story of their long commute to and from work, where we get to understand the real problem that they need solving. By incorporating that into our explanation, we're able to get across 3 distinct takeaways. The first takeaway is one that actually comes across really well in Henrik's original explanation. The fact that along the way, the customer gets to actually learn what it's like to experience this journey in different ways. And as a result, they find that they actually enjoy having the wind in their hair. So instead of the hardtop vehicle that they asked for at the top, they end up choosing a convertible. But with my version of the story, where the commute is the key element, I think we're able to get across something else, which comes across somewhat in Henrik's original posts, is the fact that we are accumulating value by shortening the commute a little bit with each iteration. And that saving accumulates. The third takeaway that I think my version of the story really helps to get across is how much we are de-risking the product development process. Because in the top half of this diagram, the first time that we realise that the car won't actually solve the customer's real problem of their 90-minute journey to and from work is when we've actually finished it. And now we'd have to go all the way back to the drawing board and start all over again in order to figure out, well, what kind of product is it that will solve their 90-minute journey to work problem? In the bottom half of the story, because we've got the ability to roll back to a previous version when the customer realizes that actually the car isn't what they need, it's actually something else, well, once we've reverted to the motorbike, maybe the way forward isn't to think about something that stays on the road, but something that flies through the air. Now, telling this story can help explain why working in this way matters, but it doesn't tell you how to make it work in practice. How that looks depends on a lot of things, from your team structures, your product management approaches, and even how the software is actually being developed. So if you can see the why, but you're not sure about how to apply it in your context, that's exactly where I help. So drop me a line, my contact details are in the description. I'd also like to genuinely hear what you took away from this today, especially if you saw something different to what I've described. Leave a comment down below and let me know what stood out for you. And if this kind of thing is useful, you'll find more like it in my other videos. I'll see you in the next one.